The Nevada desert stretched endlessly, a burning wasteland where heat shimmered off the ground like invisible fire. Dust swirled around the Marines as they crouched, eyes locked on distant steel targets. The sound of gunfire cracked through the silence. Pop, 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 then came the echoing clang of disappointment. Miss, miss, miss. Range 1,200 yards, crosswind 5 knots, barked Captain Mason Hart, scanning through his binoculars. Adjust elevation. Point 2. Fire again. The line of Marine snipers shifted, the air thick with tension. These weren't rookies, they were among the best the Corps had. Men who could shoot a coin off a fence post from half a mile. But today, the target might as well have been the moon. Another volley thundered, another silence followed. Mason clenched his jaw. Damn it, the Pentagon's newest long-range target system was supposed to prove Marine superiority. They were testing adaptive scopes, next-general AI stabilizers, cutting-edge tech meant to guarantee accuracy at impossible distances. But all that gear meant nothing when not a single round was landing. "Sir, wind's unpredictable at this range," said Sergeant Diaz, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're compensating, but the gusts keep shifting direction mid-flight." Mason lowered his binoculars. "So learn the wind," he said sharply. "It's a sniper's best friend or his worst enemy. You either read it or you fail." Diaz gave a stiff nod, but Mason could see the frustration in every man's eyes. They were trained to adapt, to control chaos, yet nature was winning. A few yards behind them, at the edge of the field, a small figure watched. A woman in dusty jeans and a sun hat, holding a basket of wild herbs she'd picked nearby. She looked completely out of place among the camo-clad Marines and armored Humvees. Private Jenkins noticed her first. "Sir, there's a civilian near the perimeter." Mason turned. "Who cleared her on the range?" The woman smiled awkwardly as Mason approached. "Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I live a few miles that way. Heard the shots. Just wanted to see what's going on." "Ma'am, this is a restricted test zone," Mason said, his voice firm but polite. "You need to step back at least 200 yards. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on the rifles and targets in the distance. "You're shooting too low," she said casually. Mason blinked. "Excuse me," she pointed toward the horizon. "Your bullets are dipping before they reach the ridge. The air's too hot, it's bending your aim." The Marines exchanged glances, trying not to laugh. "Ma'am," Mason said carefully, "the team's accounting for air temperature, wind speed, humidity, even rotation of the earth. We've got this covered." She just shrugged. "If you say so." Something in her tone, calm, unbothered, made Mason pause. "You said the air's bending the aim. You mean mirage distortion?" "Partly," she replied. "But see that tumbleweed line?" She pointed at a faint trail of dust rolling across the sand. "That's not just wind, it's a thermal, air rising fast. Your bullets are getting caught in that stream, like throwing a rock into a river current." Mason frowned. "And how do you know that?" She smiled. "I hunt coyotes. You learn the land if you want to eat." The squad chuckled quietly, but Mason's instincts told him not to dismiss her. He looked through his spotting scope again, and sure enough, the shimmer of heat along the ground looked like rippling water. Every time they fired, the air twisted unpredictably right before the bullet crossed that zone. "Sergeant, hold fire," Mason ordered. "We'll adjust position." The Marines dragged their rifles 20 feet north, away from the distortion line. The woman tilted her head. "You'll still be fighting crosswind. Aim 5 inches high and 1 left." "Trust me, 5 inches," Diaz scoffed. "That's way off our calibration." "Humor her," Mason said quietly. Diaz sighed, adjusted his rifle, and took aim. The desert went silent. One breath in, one slow exhale. Crack. A second later, ping. The metallic echo of a perfect hit rang across the desert. The Marines froze. "Holy hell," Diaz whispered, staring through the scope. "Direct center hit." The woman grinned. "Told you. Lucky shot," Jenkins muttered, though the disbelief in his voice betrayed him. "Do it again," Mason said. Diaz fired once more. Ping. Another bullseye. Now the Marines were whispering among themselves. Mason turned back to her. "Ma'am, what did you say your name was?" "Evelyn," she replied. "Evelyn Brooks. You from around here?" She nodded. "Born and raised. My daddy taught me to shoot when I was 6. You learn to listen to the land, she'll tell you how to aim." Mason looked down the range again, thoughtful. "You're saying our calculations are too mechanical. That we're ignoring what the ground and air are telling us." "Exactly." She looked toward the horizon. "You can't fight nature with equations. You work with her. For a moment, Mason just stared. The words felt like something he'd forgotten long ago. Before technology, before sensors and drones, there was instinct. He handed her his binoculars. Evelyn, think you can guide us again? She smirked. Sure, but you might not like my methods. The next hour looked nothing like Marine protocol. Evelyn had them moving their rifles in odd increments, marking wind lines with flags, even watching birds, flight paths to judge crosscurrents. The Marines grumbled at first, until the results spoke louder than pride. Ping, ping, ping. Every target fell one after another, each shot cleaner than the last. When Mason finally called ceasefire, the steel field was littered with fresh bullet marks right at the center plates. The men erupted in cheers, disbelief written across their faces. Mason turned to Evelyn, extending his hand. You just taught the Marine Sniper Division something we couldn't figure out in 3 weeks. She shook his hand, her palm rough and calloused. You boys have all the gear, but sometimes all you need is a feel for the earth. As she turned to leave, Mason called after her, Evelyn, you ever think about teaching? She laughed softly. Teaching? Me? I barely graduated high school. Doesn't matter, he said, smiling. You've got more instinct than half the Pentagon. Evelyn tipped her hat. You Marines keep your eyes open, not just your scopes. And with that, she walked off into the desert, her figure fading into the golden heat. The men stood silent for a while, watching her go. Then Diaz spoke, voice full of awe. Who the hell was that woman? Mason looked at the distant ridge where their bullets finally landed true and said quietly, the best damn sniper we never had. But little did they know, Evelyn's lesson that day would ripple far beyond the desert. The Pentagon would hear about the civilian woman who outshot the Marines, and soon, she'd be called back, not to watch, but to lead. 3 weeks later, the U.S. Marine Sniper Division's training compound in Quantico buzzed with an unusual kind of tension. Whispers traveled faster than gunfire. The woman's back. Evelyn Brooks stepped out of the black government SUV, squinting under the Virginia sun. She was wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans, her boots still dusty from Nevada. She didn't look like someone the Pentagon would summon, but when General Aldridge himself came out to greet her, jaws dropped across the base. Miss Brooks, Aldridge said, shaking her hand with a firm grip. We've reviewed Captain Hart's report. The Department of Defense wants to run a new trial, with you as consultant. Evelyn blinked. Consultant, sir, I'm not military. Aldridge smiled. You don't need to be. You understand things our data doesn't. Captain Mason Hart stood nearby, trying not to grin. He gave her a quick salute. Told you they'd call. She shook her head with a half laugh. I was hoping you were joking. Within an hour, she was on the sniper range again, but this time, she wasn't an outsider. She had her own badge, her own observation tent, and a row of officers watching every move. The test was simple on paper. 1,500-yard precision hits with new ballistic systems. But the wind today was fierce, unpredictable, exactly the kind of chaos Evelyn thrived in. All right, Marines, Mason called. You've got 1 hour. Let's see if we can outsmart Mother Nature this time. Evelyn scanned the landscape. You won't, she said softly. But you can dance with her. She kneeled, ran her fingers through the dry grass, and looked toward the hills. The air shimmered slightly near the tree line. Captain, she said, see that hawk circling northeast? He followed her gaze. Yeah, she's riding an updraft. Wind's changing direction over those trees. You shoot now, your bullet's gonna ride the same lift, and drift right. Mason looked skeptical, but he trusted her instincts more than he trusted any sensor. You heard her, team. Just 4 clicks left. The first sniper fired. Crack. Ping. Direct hit. Jesus, one Marine muttered. Do it again, Evelyn said. Now compensate 2 inches higher. The air density just dropped. Another crack. Another perfect ping. The base observers started murmuring. Even the Pentagon engineers were leaning in, recording every reading, trying to understand how a woman with no degree was outsmarting their $1,000,000 instruments. Miss Brooks, one of them asked, how exactly are you determining air density visually? Evelyn smiled faintly. You don't need to see it. You feel it. You smell it. Smell it. Yeah, when the desert cools too fast, it carries a different scent. Less dust, more sage. Means the wind's about to settle. You can hold your shot for half a second longer. They stared at her like she was describing magic. But to Mason, it made perfect sense. She wasn't calculating, she was communicating with the environment. Soon the Marines were hitting targets they once called impossible. Each shot carried precision born not of machines, but of patience and presence. After the final shot rang out, Evelyn stood, brushing dirt off her knees. The last steel target 1,500 yards away bore a single neat hole through its center. Aldridge approached, clapping slowly. "Miss Brooks, I've seen Navy SEALs miss that shot in perfect weather. You just did it in a windstorm." Evelyn smiled shyly. "Guess the land and I had a good talk." That night, inside the officers' mess, Mason found her sitting alone, sipping coffee. "You made history today," he said. She shrugged. "Feels weird. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to live quiet." "Then why'd you come back?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because when I saw those men out there, all that training, all that heart, it hurt to see them fail for something as simple as not listening. You Marines remind me of my dad." Mason tilted his head. "Your dad was in the service?" She nodded. "Vietnam vet, never talked much, but every morning, he'd sit outside before sunrise, close his eyes, and say, 'You can't shoot what you don't respect.' Took me years to understand he didn't mean the target." Mason's jaw tightened. "That's something we forget too often." Before they could say more, Aldridge entered the room with a folder. "Brooks, I've got an offer for you." She raised a brow. "Offer?" "The Pentagon wants to establish a new sniper training course. Field-based, instinct-driven marksmanship. You'd be the lead instructor." Evelyn froze. "You want me to teach Marines?" "Yes," Aldridge said firmly. "Because no algorithm can teach what you just did today." She sat back, stunned. Mason leaned forward. "You should take it, Evelyn. The Corps needs that perspective, needs you." Evelyn hesitated, looking down at her rough, calloused hands. "I'm no soldier, Captain." Mason smiled. "No, ma'am, you're something rarer, a natural." A week later, the Brooks Precision Instinct program launched at Quantico. What started as an experiment soon became a revolution. Evelyn taught the Marines to read the environment like a living thing, to use grass sway, insect noise, even silence as indicators. The Marines loved her classes. She was tough, humble, and funny in a dry country way. They started calling her Mama Hawk. Under her guidance, sniper accuracy rates soared. News outlets picked up the story, "Civilian Woman Transforms U.S. Sniper Training." Overnight, she became a national symbol of intuition over technology. But Evelyn stayed grounded. Every morning before classes, she'd step outside, close her eyes, and whisper a quiet thank you to the land, just like her father used to. One afternoon, as she was packing up after a long day, Mason walked up carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Figured you might need a refill, Mama Hawk," he said, grinning. She laughed softly. "You boys never quit with that nickname, huh?" "Afraid not. You earned it." He handed her the coffee and looked out over the firing range. The sunset bathed the targets in orange light. "You know, the Corps is better because of you." She smiled. "No, Captain, you all just needed a reminder to stop fighting the wind." He nodded slowly. "You taught us that some battles aren't won by force, but by understanding." Evelyn looked at the horizon, eyes glistening. "That's all life is, really, learning when to aim, and when to wait." As the last light faded, Mason turned to her. "So what's next for you, Evelyn Brooks, the woman who showed the Marines how to hit the impossible?" She took a deep breath of desert air and smiled. "Next, maybe I'll finally teach myself to rest." He chuckled. "You've earned that." But as she walked away, the wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of her father's words through the evening breeze. "You can't shoot what you don't respect." And somewhere in the distance, another shot rang true, the mark of a Marine who had finally learned to listen.